Excellent. All
No,
right.
Aubrey, thanks.
Yes. So I'm Aubrey Voelker. I work with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services as their salt reduction program Green SnowPro coordinator. So my role at DES is a lot less of the, fun science stuff that happens and a lot more customer service, talking to people, certifying all of our commercial applicators in the state. I've been with DES since November 2021, so a little over a year, in which I have learned a lot about chloride contamination, salt in general. So it's been a lot of fun so far. Let's see if I can start this. Excellent. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes, it's good. Thank you.
Excellent. So going green SnowPro in New Hampshire, pretty much I plan to talk about a little bit of the history of salting in New Hampshire, the chlorine contamination we've seen throughout the years, a lot of the science, briefly touch on the science behind it, and then really move into why our Green SnowPro program was created and what we've seen in the past almost a decade since it's been going, and lessons we've learned, things we know we need to change, how we need to evolve, and what we're going to do in the future. And that's not, there we go. All right, so New Hampshire has a bit of a salty history. Don't worry, got lots of good salt puns in here. We were the first state to actually start using salt, winter road salt, for regular winter road maintenance around 1941. And salt use has roughly doubled within the past 40 years. I believe right now, according with the DOT, it's about 21 tons per lane mile per year, which is quite a lot. Not as bad as some other states, but still a lot of oversalting. And we've also seen a rise in chloride impairments in our waterways. We had about 18 in 2008, and in 2020, that number was over 50 chloride impairments in our waterways. So first, why do we even use salt? Most importantly, tourism. I know in New Hampshire and a lot of surrounding states, we have a lot of people coming and going, especially to the ski hills. Once there's a nice big blizzard out, everyone's wanting to go up north to our ski hills, expecting those roads to be clear and safe for them. Commuting to work. Of course, fortunately, a lot of us can work from home now if we need to, but still plenty of people that need to get out into their jobs. Just general needs. We all have places we need to go. Emergency vehicles, police officers, fire trucks, ambulances. They need to go and have clear roads, clear, safe roads whenever they get called out. And then there's also the wants. Even if roads aren't clean, even if there is a huge snowstorm at 10 o'clock at night, a lot of us still want to be able to go wherever we want, whenever we want, and not worry about snow and ice on the roads. And then another big thing is, for the most part, salt is cheap and affordable. Granted, everything right now, all the costs are on the rise, but salt is still one of the cheaper options for de-icing roadways. It's effective, it's readily available, compared to maybe some other materials out there as well. However, salt does have an ugly side. Most of us here know that when we all have a science background, we know that it's toxic to fish and invertebrates, some other species, contaminates our drinking waters. I know New Hampshire is definitely seeing a rise of lots of homeowner wells that are getting contaminated, and it's expensive to fix. It destroys vegetation, it corrodes vehicles and infrastructure, which is also very costly. And there's no good way to actually remove it from the environment. It's not removed by any plants, doesn't stick to the soils. I think right now the only way to really get rid of salt is through reverse osmosis, which is incredibly high energy, incredibly expensive, so just not a good alternative. So kind of the roadway to Green SnowPro and how this program kind of came about started with the Interstate 93 expansion. So DOT began working on environmental impact statements for this proposed expansion from 4 lanes to 8 lanes in a 20-mile corridor that was adjacent to Massachusetts. During these preliminary data showed that about 4 watersheds had significant chloride impairments. As you can kind of see on the map there, primarily in the southern New Hampshire. So from this, they decided for each of these 4 watersheds to prepare TMDLs. So total maximum daily load. So they looked at chloride in the form of salt that was being imported into these watersheds and from what sources. So, most sources were kinds of de-icing. So you have the roadway de-icing, parking lots, salt pile runoff, and then some from water softeners, food waste, atmospheric deposition. But kind of in general, they realized, going through all this data, doing all this testing, I think they gathered like 3 million different data points in a matter of a year. But they're able to confirm that on average, a 35% reduction needed to happen to maintain or get to standards. And this is before the added, imports from, 4 more lanes of highway. So that was going to cause even more loading into the environment. And if I know a lot of you are scientists on here, so if anyone's really interested in kind of going into the nitty-gritty science of how these TMDLs were kind of prepared, all the analysis, definitely feel free to reach out to me. We have the full reports that were prepared in 2008. I'm happy to share those with you, so you can definitely go on a much deeper dive into that. So even though, these reports first were really shown in southern New Hampshire, kind of our Manchester, Nashua, Concord area, if you're familiar with the state, it's not just southern New Hampshire. This is a statewide problem. While most of our contamination is in that southern region, just where we're more developed, there's a lot more people, infrastructure. We are seeing it in other parts of the states within, the past 10 plus years. So it's not just southern New Hampshire. We do need to address this within the entire state. Kind of leads to this. This is we have lakes with over 10 years of data, and of the 43 lakes, 33 of those had significant increasing trends in chloride concentrations. So it just really shows, this is an issue. Something needs to be done. It needs to be addressed. We can also look at rivers as well, at specific conductants. It is an indicator of human interactions as a result of stormwater and groundwater infiltration. So we can kind of, chlorides can definitely affect the conductants as well. And we do see a statistically significant statewide increasing trend in our rivers as well as lakes. So that leads us to, where is the salt coming from? So when the I-93 expansion happened and all the TMDLs were being prepared, a salt working group was formed, and part of their job was to figure out where the salt is coming from. And surprisingly, a lot of people thought a lot of it would be from the DOT. They're the ones maintaining all the state roads, the big, large highways like 93. Surprisingly enough, though, a lot of it was private parking lots. These are your grocery stores, hotels, Walmarts, Targets. That is where they're seeing the majority of the winter road salt runoff. So kind of became, well, now, how do we address this problem? Why are we seeing it in these private parking lots and not on the roadways? So when this, kind of all came about, DOT did start a lot of salt reduction efforts, included lots of different best management practices to reduce their salt, prevent oversalting. Some of them like pre-wetting their salt so that it starts working much faster once it hits the pavement, utilizing a liquid brine, even just better computer controls, being able to use GPS, monitor their routes a little better. And they actually have averaged roughly an 18% decrease in their salt use since they implemented these in 2007. A lot of municipalities, especially again down in the southern area where they're having a lot of the chloride issues, also started implementing a lot of these practices as well and have seen some good decrease in their salt use. But again, the private sector, what is going on there? So that's where we really started looking. This is what needed to be addressed. And really the main issue is over salting. Way too much salt is being applied, more salt than is actually necessary to maintain safety is being applied to all these different parking lots. And a lot of it is just, at least with our private sector here in New Hampshire, our commercial plow drivers, there is no governing agency, that says, this is how you apply salt, this is what you have to use. There's no legal certification they have to go to, minus, maybe a CDL driving, depending what equipment they're using. So there is a lack of education of how salt works. How do you properly apply it? So, anybody with a pickup truck can, start their own company to start salting parking lots and driveways without having really all that much background in it. And then another issue is a lot of these companies are scared to be sued for slip and fall claims. Random person goes to grocery store, middle of the night, while it's freezing rain, they slip and fall and they might decide to sue. So that definitely is one of their biggest worries for commercial applicators. They don't want to worry about this. They would rather play it safe, apply that huge layer of salt, than have to even try to worry about, getting a claim against them. So with that, it was, assumed there was a need to create a standardized training program that improves salt reduction practices, but also provides some sort of liability protection into state law. Now, this is the only way we're going to get commercial applicators really on board with this. And that's how Green SnowPro, really came to be. In 2013, the House bill was passed, and it created this voluntary commercial applicator certification program, also known as Green SnowPro. And I do want to point out that this is a voluntary certification program. Nobody is required to do that, as wonderful as that would be. It is all voluntary, so, it does leave some, how do we then get this out to everyone and have everyone learn about it? But as far as, getting Green SnowPro certified, getting some protection, the first thing to do for our applicators is to take coursework. And all of these courses mainly focus on best management practices that are going to aid in your salt reduction. And again, focusing on only applying the correct amount of salt that's actually needed to maintain safety and no extra. So we partner with a lot of different places, the University of New Hampshire Technology Transfer Center, the Snow and Ice Management Association, Smart About Salt Council up in Canada, who provides an online training option, which was especially great during 2020 when we were very limited to in-person courses that we could offer. And then training is not just needed for their initial certification. They need to continue to train at minimum every 2 years. So they have to continue to take coursework so they learn about these updates, and it really drills it into their heads. And then certify. Once you take the training, you send an application to me at DES. We make sure, all the ducks are in a row. You receive your wonderful Green SnowPro certification, and you're good to go. And so few main goals really that we want to see with Green SnowPro. Increase in efficiency, increase, how salt's working or whatever other materials you might be using. We have the magnesium chlorides, calcium chlorides, all that fun stuff. But really, it's increase the efficiency. Make it so it's being used, during proper weather, proper precipitation, pavement temps, all of that. And then lower cost. If you're using less salt, your costs should go down. We have had a few, especially our larger companies that are part of the Green SnowPro program, who have reported that they've seen significant cost reductions in their salt just by, better calibration, knowing their application rates. A few that have started utilizing liquid brine, within a few years, they've seen huge cost reductions. So that's also a really good selling point of, hey, use less salt, save money. And then, of course, maintain public safety. That is the #1 priority. We want to make sure these roadways are safe, parking lots, sidewalks. We don't want anyone falling, getting injured. So we always make sure that's the goal of you're using the proper amount. You're doing the right practices. And then an increase in documentation. Really, one of the main goals of this program is just knowing how much salt you are applying. It's amazing. I've actually attended a few of the Green SnowPro classes, and there are definitely people there who they had no clue how much salt they're even applying each year. So just knowing, how many pounds are you applying per square footage, to renew their application each year. Each Green SnowPro certificate holder must submit an annual salt use report. And it's a pretty simple report. It's just the amount of salt you put down, what towns you put it down in. We do always encourage more documentation, just because it's better protection, so knowing for sure all their application rates, weather conditions, if they can utilize some sort of GPS technology, just so if there is a slip and claim fall against them, having all that documentation is very helpful, good to have. They're going to be much better covered. And then, of course, as we're always talking about, we want to increase environmental quality. We want to tackle these chloride issues. We want to see those graphs start to go down. All that. And then, of course, decrease liability. That is the biggest concern for our private applicators. They don't want to get sued. They don't want to deal with all of that. So along with this Green SnowPro certification, commercial applicators that are certified, along with the property owners who hire them, are granted limited liability protection against damages arising from snow and ice conditions. So this was, the biggest selling point for this program. This is what really leads a lot of commercial salt applicators to come and get certified, along with the fact that property owners get this as well. So we are seeing a huge increase in, property owners and managers requiring whoever they hire to do their snow and ice management for the season to become Green SnowPro certified. So big selling points, kind of one of the most important things that we have. And, fortunately, we actually don't hear a lot about if claims have been made against any of our applicators, because most of the time the charges get dropped so quickly. Somebody tries to sue them, they have their Green SnowPro certificate along with all their proper documentation. More often than not, charges get dropped right away. They're not charged. It's great. We did, for the first time this past fall, have a company that got charged with a snow and ice claim that actually went to a full jury, which this was the very first time this actually happened. So it's very interesting to see, how does this actually hold up in a jury in the court. The good news is that all charges were dropped. They're seen not guilty on all charges. The bad news, we just found out that there was an appeal made on the very last day possible. So we're kind of waiting to hear back about that and what's going to happen. So kind of shifting over to, how has Green SnowPro grown in the past? What kind of numbers are we seeing as far as, certificate holders? And really, we have seen a lot of growth. We have new certificates issued each year. 2019, for whatever reason, just really skyrocketed up. Probably a mix between just more companies hearing about the program. And I think we also had a few larger companies join as well. And how the certification works is each person in your company, whether you have 2 employees or you have 50 performing snow and ice management duties, they need to take the required coursework and receive certifications. So we do have 3 different levels of certification. Our individual is pretty much, one man show, one person with the truck. It's just them. But for larger companies, they usually have typically the supervisor or the owner will have a master certificate holder who in general is pretty much responsible for overseeing everything. They are the person responsible for submitting an annual salt use report for their company. And then usually all of those employees who kind of work under their supervision are subordinate certificate holders. They still have to complete all the same coursework as everyone else as their master certificate holder, but they do not have to submit their own individual salt use report each year. That's covered under the master. So that is why we do see, a lot of new certificates of subordinates each year. They tend to be the seasonal employees, employees that might only stay around 1 or 2 years. And we also looked a little bit into kind of length of membership. Obviously these numbers are going to continue to change drastically as we continue on into the years, especially, last year and this year too. We have a lot of new companies coming into the program. I definitely lost count way early on the number of phone calls I had with people who went, "Hey, I just heard about this certification. What is it? How do I get it? What's this limited liability?" So it is good to see that word is getting out about the program. It's starting to grow a lot more. That's what we want to see. And I just really like this quote. It really kind of encompasses everything we strive for in the program. Green SnowPro program helps bring us together in the state and provides eye-opening knowledge that to the benefits of embracing such change while protecting the environment, ourselves, and our customers. And that's from Justin Gamester. He and his company have been part of the program, I think, since the very beginning. They help us a lot with our annual SALT symposium and really promoting Green SnowPro. But this, again, we kind of become a whole little Green SnowPro community family. All these courses, the symposium is a really great time for everybody in the state to come together, ask questions, talk about challenges they're having, what can be done, especially when last year and this year, we've seen some weird weather and climate. So, the best way to treat the roadways during those, there's lots of questions. So it's a great time for, just everyone to come together, work together. And so the biggest question, is salt reduction being achieved? Particularly, is salt reduction being achieved by those who have been part of the Green SnowPro program? The answer is that it's complicated. One of our main complications and hurdles is just the actual reporting of salt. So our annual salt use reports, when there used to be an online option that everyone could report everything on there and we would get the nice reports sent to us. That was with an outside company we were partnered and working with that we've had some issues with getting some service with it. So we've had to resort back to just using paper hard copies that get sent in the mail to me, which of course, as we all know, that takes a really long time to process all the paper copies. We just don't have the staff or really time to take a good look at everything. So that's kind of altered, what we're able to look at as far as looking at salt reduction throughout these 10 years. But what we did do, myself and one of my colleagues, Andrew Grant, he did a lot of this. We looked at companies who have been part of Green SnowPro for 5 or more years, and we had 5 or more years of annual salt reports from them. So very small subset, we looked at 38 companies, we had 231 salt use reports, and we took that and we compared the salt use, compared it to the winter severity index. So obviously, depending what kind of winter we have, gonna partially determine how much salt needs to be used. So what we saw really, again, with this very preliminary small subset of data is that it's actually pretty average. We haven't seen any significant decrease in salt use. So what's happening? Of course, winter severity is not the only factor influencing salt application rates. Colder sustained temperatures, snowier conditions require less salt than others. And also, again, I think I mentioned it before, this increased cycles of freezing and thawing. Last year we saw it a lot. This year we are too. Actually, I think today, right now in Concord, New Hampshire, it's supposed to get like 48 degrees and sunny. So any, snow that's still sitting on the road, it starts thawing and then it freezes overnight, which means salt is then being applied even though there is no winter weather or winter precipitation, things that would show up on a winter severity index. So it doesn't give us the full picture of what's happening. And then probably one of the biggest things, influencing salt use in the state of New Hampshire, and I'm sure many other places, is public expectations. People expect to be able to go anywhere at any time, day or night, middle of a snowstorm, ice storm. They really don't care. There's just that expectation that roads are going to be clear. One thing we did at DES decide to kind of look at, just as we talk to people, all of us that have lived in New Hampshire for a while, those that have lived in New Hampshire their whole lives, is there any sort of kind of cultural difference in levels of service expected between kind of northern and southern New Hampshire? Just kind of when you talk to a lot of people, it's definitely thought that, southern New Hampshire, much higher expectations versus northern New Hampshire. They tend to consider themselves more the hardy people. They know they they don't expect to have to go out all the time. They know how to drive. So we did do a quick look. Again, very preliminary, small subset of data. But what we did decide to do is we took this winter severity index and we looked at kind of both north and south. We split it right in like the Lakes region, if you know, state of New Hampshire, right in the middle. And what we found, it was actually really surprising how drastic it was. Even though northern New Hampshire tends to have much worse winters, they tend to apply a lot less salt per square foot. Of course, there's lots of other things to consider while looking at this, more development in New Hampshire, such as hospitals and schools where there just might be more frequent salt use, more people, which means more liability. So it tend to err on the side of caution. But it does bring a good point, is the level of service expectations higher in the South? And even just in general all over New Hampshire, and how do we address that? So that kind of leads us into the future of Green SnowPro, what we want to see done, how we're going to make things better, how we're actually going to see a decrease in salt. So first off, municipalities. Right now, Green SnowPro is just for commercial salt applicators. However, a Senate bill was approved in 2021 that would recognize municipalities as eligible for Green SnowPro certification. We are kind of in our final moments of drafting up all the rules, which then will be sent for approval. Very excited about this, especially when municipalities are the second largest contributor to winter road salt in New Hampshire. definitely need to get them on board. We have a lot of municipalities that are excited to be able to say they're Green SnowPro certified. It'll help with a lot of their, grants they're looking at, especially those in southern New Hampshire that are seeing a lot of chloride contamination in their watersheds. So once those are approved, and what we're trying to focus on with municipalities is a lot more of that documentation, a lot more accountability, a lot more focus into very specific best management practices for salt reduction. A few updates with our coursework. We are adding some additional refresher course options for our commercial Green SnowPro certificate holders, specifically talking with the University of New Hampshire. This summer we plan on adding a few more. That's going to be a lot more, hands-on, focus on just calibration, application rates, really those little things instead of just sitting in a classroom looking at a PowerPoint the whole time. Also just found out that the Smart About Salt Council, who provides all of our online training, is going to be offering their online courses in Spanish. So that's wonderful. It'll make it much more accessible to those whose, first language is not English. So waiting for, I think they're hoping for end of January, but definitely coming soon. And then outreach. This is the biggest thing we need to do. As I said before, talked a lot about public expectations, and turns out just a lot of people don't know how salt works. They want that salt to be crunching under their feet when they're on the sidewalks, into the grocery store. They don't understand that salt, rocks of salt don't need to be there. If you can feel that crunch, it's either oversalted or it wasn't applied, in the proper conditions. And just, again, the expectations, do you need to go to Walmart at 10 p.m. during a blizzard wearing Crocs? No. So we need to alter some of those, expectations, really start reaching out to others with that. And then actually one more update that I completely forgot to put on this presentation that we at DES, especially in the water assistance section with Steve, are excited about. We are now accepting proposals for a chloride-focused watershed-based management plan. And this will be the first chloride-focused plan, for DES. Most of our watershed-based plans before have focused on other pollutants. I think phosphorus, nitrogen have been the biggest ones. So this will be the first time that we're accepting proposals, be able to provide grant money to focus on chlorides. And those, I believe, are accepting till early February. So we're excited to see where that goes. And of course, if you need more information, you can find us on our webpage. We have a Facebook, try to post some fun stuff. And then if you have any questions, again, that is my email, my phone. Feel free to reach out at any time. I know I went through a lot of different information in this. If you want more details on anything, I'm happy to share it at any time. Actually, going to see if I can stop sharing. If anyone has questions.
Aubrey, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. And I do have a question.
Absolutely.
If going through the program will reduce companies, at least the private firms' liability, and maybe for the public outfits as well, then that should be reflected in their insurance rates.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good point you bring up. And we have started kind of talking with different insurance companies. We have a few insurance companies that have learned about this program and, have really started pushing for their applicators to get the certification. I mean, there's not, we can't say whether or not they can lower the rates. It'd be great if we can do that. I think some are hoping to start doing that as well. And I think a lot of the applicators would like that because their insurance rates are really going through the roof right now. So if getting this certification is a way they can lower their insurance rates and then, be part of the program, learn salt reduction efforts. That's
not just the insurance rates for the applicators, but also the companies that hire them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, that's definitely, again, one of those things we want to focus on in the future is really talking to more insurance companies about that and how we can work together.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you know what municipalities are doing in New Hampshire then?
Yeah, so especially some of our municipalities, they actually, for certain EPA requirements, especially a lot of them that are in watersheds that do not just chloride impairments, but lots of other impairments as well. Some of, I think Steve might be able to give a little more information, some of them with an MS4 permit. I believe in next year in 2024, they're going to be required, some of them, to do salt reduction plans. It's going to be coming up. So that's why they're part of our Green SnowPro for municipalities. They're excited for, because that's going to be really help them with that. But again, we don't have any like specific regulation, outside of the certification of what they have to do. There are a lot that are doing it on their own, utilizing liquid brines, even determining low salt zones, low salt roadways.
And a follow-up question to that is, if a municipality submits a plan, is there a standard you're expecting it to go to, or it's more of a process giving them suggestions on how to improve the plan?
So as far as the salt reduction plan that's going to be with the Green SnowPro.
Well, I'm sorry, I just want to get first, Anne asked about municipalities, so I thought you were talking about helping.
Right. Yeah. So some of the municipalities are going to be required to, submit salt reduction plan. Steve might be able to get a little more information of exactly what's required. But that is something they will also need if they want to become Green SnowPro certified. So for their Green SnowPro certification, they are going to there's going to be certain requirements they make sure they include in the plan. But a lot of it is, going to be, we kind of address those issues, give them, some help as to what they can do. But with like the MS4 permits with the EPA, I'm not well versed in exactly what they actually need, but I can definitely find out for you.
And this is Steve from New Hampshire. I just follow that up with, I don't know what the MS4 situation is down your neck of the woods, but in New Hampshire currently, we have about 45 communities that are MS4 municipalities, and obviously they have minimum control measures in the phase 2 permit relative to chloride. So those communities that have demonstrated chloride impairments, it's kind of treated almost like a TMDL criteria. So those communities are going to have to demonstrate that they no longer are contributing excess chlorides to those impaired waterways, freshwater lakes and ponds and our flowing rivers and streams. They can't exceed the concentration of chlorides that's already in that receiving water body, and have a plan in place that demonstrates an intention to reduce chlorides on the landscape getting into those surface waters. And as many of you know, this is I don't want to say nearly impossible, but it's a really difficult pollutant to track, because it doesn't go away once it's in solution. It's there. It's not a traditional character in New Hampshire like Aubrey alluded to. We're used to dealing with phosphorus and nitrogen and suspended solids. Those are things we can do, best management practices, stormwater control measures. We know that playing field. Chlorides, once it's in solution, it's there, forever essentially. So yes, there will be criteria for them to meet. There'll be limits established in their permits by municipality, by water body, that they'll be expected to meet. And I mean, we all realize like there's no like structural BMP to address chlorides. The only thing we can do right now is minimize the amount of salt put down. And that's why this RFP that Aubrey mentioned is unique in our state. It's the first attempt to do a watershed-based plan where there's a chloride impairment and it's paired with a water supply. So it's going to be based in a watershed that has a designated water supply system, because chlorides in our surface water drinking wells has increased 150%. Many wells are being abandoned in New Hampshire and need to be replaced. And in surface waters, the chloride concentration has increased 71%. So we're chasing this thing kind of late in the game. But anyway, it's a long answer, but MS4 communities are kind of our test bed because they're required to do stuff. You know, they have no choice. So I wish we had the green SnowPro municipal rules in effect today or last year, but they're coming, and we hope by the end of 2023 they'll be recognized by the program, and that helps them meet their permit requirements. So they're very eager to volunteer and get involved. Thanks for letting me chime in on that.
Is there a
Thank
contamination
you.
difference in the wells north and south?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Is there a salt contamination difference in the wells north and south New Hampshire?
I don't believe that's been, I'd have to go do a deep dive into if there is. I would assume it's much more prevalent in southern New Hampshire, just again, much more developed, a lot more roadways.
Yeah, it's,
And
yeah, and we're looking at that right now because that request for proposals is linked to drinking water sources, so private, public wells, school wells, and basically the pattern of contamination of groundwater contamination follows our transportation corridors and development corridors. So you can go up 93 and see the swath of contamination and go up I-89, but it is primarily it's mostly concentrated in South Central and coastal New Hampshire, where our population density is greatest.
Dr. Jackson, you had a question?
Yeah, I was curious, going back, and so this may be more of a question for Steve than Aubrey, but are you using the EPA 1988 standards in your definitions of impairment and your targeting of your TMDLs? In other words, the 880 and 250, because of the data that got thrown up there, I saw nothing close to that. And so I realize it could be very local, but I was just curious if you're using those recommended standards, which are also your statewide standards presently, from what I could see online.
Yeah, it's a good question, and obviously our water quality program coordinators would be best able to answer that question for you, Ken Evertson and Matt Wood. But we use the conductivity standard as a surrogate of 850 specific conductance because we don't have enough chloride data proper. But if I was to, I mean, I could, well, I won't share it now, but looking at the spreadsheet that we just developed for eligible public water supply systems, you know, we're seeing values in the 1200s, 2000s for sodium and for chlorides. And in surface waters, you know, we have background levels. For example, Aubrey shared the Beaver Brook watershed, just background surface water chloride levels are in the 300s in that watershed. Just, you know, that's the background number, which is high to begin with. And then obviously the pointed samples for that TMDL were much higher. Yeah. And like everywhere else. So I can get you our chloride criteria and try to drop it in the chat before we finish, or you can follow up with an email and we'll definitely hammer that down for you. Aubrey and I aren't the hardcore scientists. We're more the program manager level, dealing with our customer base, but it's a great question, and be happy to answer it for you if you follow up with an email.
Well, if you're seeing, you know, in the 100 to 300 for your chlorides, or convert it from conductivity to chloride, that's fine. Those are much higher values than I saw in those line graphs. And that might have been a subset.
Yeah,
right.
It's a subset.
I think it was a subset of where we had data of 10 years or more.
Yes.
But, you know, we're getting freakishly high spikes when we do just, you know, random samples or responding to, or we'll see it in our volunteer monitoring data all the time. So it's pretty egregious in certain watersheds, especially in those southern corridors that we mentioned.
It's that now I understand what's driving it. Thank you.
Sure. And of course, I'm sure it's the same in your watersheds. You know, the highest concentrations are in the summer months in New Hampshire. That's when we have the most egregious chloride concentrations. It's during summer because we're getting whacked with so much drought. Our base flows are so diminished that the chloride concentration just climbs through the roof.
So I'm gonna break in just because I think we're gonna lose our speakers soon. So I want to give Zach a chance to ask a question and Kate. Zach? Zach's from the PADEP.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I was just going to note to give an idea of our sort of permit universe. We have around 250 MS4 individual permits, and I think just over 500 MS4 general permits. A lot of those, however, choose to operate under sort of cooperative countywide plans so that you're not developing a separate watershed management plan every couple miles, because some of those are fairly close-knit municipalities, even though they're separate permits. Anyway, my question was just going to be, I don't know if you've looked at this data or not, but in some of the reductions you've started to see across the state, has there been a corresponding reduction in salt storage piles, both in volume stored and discharges from those piles?
No, I don't believe that's something we've actually looked into, but it would be really interesting and something we should. So unfortunately, I don't actually have a good answer for you, but that would be interesting to see if there is that correlation.
Sure, okay.
Kate?
Yeah, thanks. I was curious, and I don't know if either of you have an answer to this, but I'd love to hear if you know what types of organizations, who led the charge, policy change, or policy creation and implementation at the legislature, who drove that, and if there are any particular lessons learned on really moving the policy to around liability forward. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for us.
Yeah, I think I'm going to let Steve answer that one if he doesn't mind, just because Steve's been part of this program much longer than I have and was a lot more involved as far as, pushing that policy, getting that limited liability as well. Steve, if you don't mind jumping in, you could probably give a more detailed answer than I can.
No, Aubrey, and that was the politest answer and segue you could give, because really it's just because I'm old. But thank you for being so kind. It's a great question. This is the question that New Hampshire DES Green SnowPro gets asked frequently by other states like Wisconsin and Minnesota and others that salt heavily like we do, because they perceive it as a miracle that we got legislative traction for three bills to pass to give us on our current footing. And believe me, in New Hampshire, it was a miracle. And the short answer is it didn't go the creation of Green SnowPro, as Aubrey alluded to, was a total result of expanding the highway I-93 from 4 lanes to 8 lanes. And there was the TMDLs, salt reduction, source allocation studies done. And then essentially DOT was off the hook. I mean, you could see their salt reduction. I mean, their salt contribution was one of the smaller pieces of the pie. Municipalities were identified and they started implementing best practices. And then the commercial sector was the one. It's like, holy cow, it's over 50% of the salt load. So that's how Green Snow was pitched. It was part of the agreement to widen I-93. Was like, okay, DOT, they've demonstrated a 40% reduction in that corridor. Municipalities, 35% reduction. Like, that's incredible. What about the private sector? So that's how the language got started. And we said, hey, let's try this volunteer program targeting the commercial sector. There was 2 failed attempts to get a bill through. it wasn't pretty. It was kind of on life support. And then this is the truth, the dirty truth we don't put on our website, was that a House member was a private salt applicator interested in the program, because he said this, his lights went on. He's like, holy smokes, we are responsible for creating so much impact. So he was our ace in the hole. And ironically, his last name was Waters, so it was meant to happen. House Rep Waters. And so he was responsible for getting the Green SnowPro legislation through. He educated his colleagues, and it went through. And so that's what it was. It's, it wasn't like we wore them down over time. It's like we had a voice internally that lobbied for the programs, and that went through. And then we got greedy a couple of years later and said, let's get that liability in. So we modeled it after the ski industry, who at the time, one of our governors happened to be part owner of a ski area in New Hampshire. So we modeled the limited liability language almost identical to what ski areas use in New Hampshire. Because when you go and rent ski equipment, you sign that, well, you never read it, but you sign the waiver and like, oh yeah, if I wrap myself around a ski lift pole, I won't sue you. Because skiing is inherently dangerous. You're going down an icy hill at high rates of speed, right? So is driving on icy roads. So we adopted the ski area language. And if you compared the two, you'd say, wow, these are very similar. So that was the second miracle. And then the third miracle is that Senate Bill 131 went through the Senate a couple of years ago now, and Aubrey's working on writing the rules now, but we got the enabling legislation through. But again, at this point, it's high profile, it has traction, and that's kind of the short history of our miracles in the New Hampshire legislature, and we're not looking back. But it was very fortuitous, as you can see. I don't have any grand strategy. It's just you find somebody internally that can maybe be your ally. Helps if they operate a plow too.
Just a quick question, if I can, about how you identified the parking lots being 50% of the contribution. Was that basically just on the salt usage, or was there anything more sophisticated than that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of that I-93 impact, environmental impact study was aggressive water quality monitoring and modeling through our TMDL program, and with DOT footing the bill. So it was, I forget how many data points it was, but it was based in the I-93 corridor specifically. So you had those contributing communities, somebody delineated the buffer area of Porcupine Brook, Beaver Brook, and we had data loggers out there 24/7 for a period of time. And then they did the sector load analysis by, okay, this sub watershed is 80% commercial parking lots and our chloride values are X. So I think that is explained in decent detail in the reference documents that Aubrey mentioned earlier. I wish it had continued, because it would be great to have watched. Yeah. But it's like those studies are funded for a finite amount of time to make the point and get the TMDL generated. But we still have trend monitoring stations down there on several of those brooks, and we're still tracking some of that data.
So Aubrey said she has a meeting was postponed for her, so she has a few minutes left. Steve, I don't know if you have a few minutes left.
I do, and I'm thrilled that our SALT Symposium annual meeting got canceled, because gives us a little breathing space between meetings today. Yeah. Thank you. We'd love to chat further if you'd like.
Thank you.
So you mentioned other states like Wisconsin and Minnesota that have been you've been talking to. Has anybody else close to anything like your program? Any other states?
So I believe Wisconsin is the closest to getting something passed. I've been talking with one of the ladies over there, and they're right now drafting up some rules to, again, and they also want to be able to include the limited liability. So I believe they are probably the closest to getting a program similar to what we have. I know Minnesota has a similar certification program, but they don't have the limited liability aspect of it. And then of course, we, definitely get inquiries from lots of other states who want to see this happen, asking how did we do it? What needs to be done?
Have you heard from Pennsylvania at all?
I don't believe so. I think primarily I've heard a little bit from Vermont, Maryland, New York, no Massachusetts recently.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything from Pennsylvania. I don't know if Steve, they've reached out to you before.
I don't think so, but doesn't mean they haven't.
Right.
We get a lot of inquiries, and once people hear about the level of coordination effort and the legislative requirements, the calls kind of stop coming. but I don't recall anybody from PA getting in touch with us. Not that we wouldn't welcome the call.
No.
We do have kind of environmentally interested representatives down here in southeastern Pennsylvania, but of course we've had no snow this year. So
Well, likewise, I can see my grass right now.
However, the fact that we have no snow has not precluded us from salting roads.
That's right.
actually, that's true, Pete. Yep.
We had an ice storm the other day, and someone came, a private, a vendor came and salted right at the end of the ice. So it sat there for days, and then in front of the post office. And when we swept it up, it was over 5 gallons of salt that we swept up.
My gosh.
And just before rain, I might add.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something in over the years of Green SnowPro, and we talk to the management companies like condominiums, apartments, big box stores when they hire Green SnowPro contractors. The contractors themselves will often complain to Aubrey and I that they get called back to treat areas again because they can't see rock salt, and it makes the owners and customers nervous. And our Green SnowPro certified applicators will say, I put down the appropriate amount of salt, I put down the right product, and if they're using brine, you can't see anything. Like, my customers are complaining that they're going to fall because they can't see rock salt. And it's like, well, if you see it, it's not effective. It's not doing anything, but they will call them back and make them apply a second time.
And unfortunately, then these companies risk, losing this bid, losing, that contract if they don't go back and resalt, even when they do know better.
Do you have applicators who are using equipment, pickup trucks or larger dump trucks, and the equipment's just old and beat up, and they're losing lots of salt, whether they want to deposit it or not? Anytime there's a stop sign or a driveway or something, then you see a pile of salt on the road.
I've definitely seen that. I mean, I've been behind random trucks that have the salting equipment or at a stop sign, and it's just still going. So yes, that's definitely seen in New Hampshire.
Yeah, we're not really known for doing thorough inspections of vehicles in New Hampshire. So there's a lot of rusted tailgates, rusted truck bodies where it's just in a constant state of spilling sand and salt. Yeah.
So I had a question regarding the limited liability protection. As you mentioned it to be an important component of the certification program. I suspect it was the last piece added legislatively, and the hardest piece probably to accomplish. So would you say the certification program would have met with at least limited success without the liability protection?
It's hard to say. I mean, definitely that limited liability is the biggest piece that really drives most of our commercial applicators to go through the coursework, do the certification. It's hard to say. I doubt it would have been, as successful or grown as much as we have seen over the years, just because that has been such a driving factor, not only for the applicators themselves, but again, for these property owners. So, I mean, again, we can these applicators, not saying they don't care at all about the environment. Some of them definitely do. You can show them all those pretty graphs with the water quality, but they're going to go, okay, that's great. We'd like to see that. What does that do for me? I'm still going to have people who are going to try to sue me if they slip and fall in this parking lot. So it definitely was the biggest driving force. I don't think we would see as much growth as we have without it.
Well, the municipalities would care more than the private contractors about the environment. I'm wondering if some leverage can be achieved through municipalities in a cooperative, voluntary kind of capacity.
It's definitely what we are hoping for.
Thank you.
Do you have much outreach regarding salt pile management?
Not yet. Again, one of those things we really want to begin to do, especially for myself. I have, kind of a background in outreach, environmental education. I'm excited to really start doing that. And once we actually are able to finish up with drafting all the rules for our municipal Green SnowPro program, that's kind of taken priority. Once we kind of can send that out into the world for approval, myself especially will have some more time to start focusing on a lot of that outreach that is very, very much needed. And I will say we have what's also, I guess, a positive outlook. Lots of nonprofits throughout the state have started learning about, this program as well as the chloride impairments. And so they're also starting to push for a lot of this, educating the public about how salt works, all of that. So that's really great to see. We're hoping to, begin some more partnerships with some of these nonprofits who already know the local communities trust to give them this information. So definitely a positive outlook with outreach in the future, but not quite yet.
This is Jeff Schmidt from the Fish and Boat Commission. I have a question about educational opportunities. It sounds to me if a lot of the parties hiring commercial applicators to do their salt application for them aren't really very knowledgeable at all. And it seems to me brochures might be useful. I heard very clearly that there's only been one full jury trial on record in the state. And, we're talking about decades and decades of possible injuries to people, and only one jury trial, and the verdict was not guilty for the applicator. So if people know that there's very minimal legal liability if somebody does slip and fall, maybe they'll get a realistic picture that they don't have to keep asking the commercial applicators who are certified to come back multiple times to reapply, and have confidence that the program is doing what it's supposed to do, and they're actually saving themselves money.
Right. And I do just want to say that jury trial I mentioned, so that was the first one that involved the Green SnowPro certification. There may have been, more slip and fall claims that went to a jury trial before Green SnowPro came into effect. This was just a big one for us since it really kind of tested the certification. So I did just want to make that clear that it had to do with first jury trial with that Green SnowPro certification in effect. But then, yes, everything else you said about these property owners, managers also need the education, and what can we provide for them, which is also some of our future goals, having certain handouts, brochures. We would also like to provide something for our contractors that, they can give, whatever property owners that they're, contracted with, to let them know, like, hey, these are the practices we're going to use. This is what you can expect from us, to also kind of increase that communication between them, so everybody is on the same page.
And can you please tell us a little bit more about the Smart About Salt Council, who they are and what they do, what their mission is?
Yeah, so their organization, they're based out of Toronto up in Canada. I think probably kind of compare them to the Snow and Ice Management Association we have here in the States. They provide a lot of different online coursework. I think they might have their own kind of general certification as well, again, up in Canada. But we partnered with them. I believe that was right around like 2019, 2020, when we were very limited to what we could have for in-person courses just due to COVID. So an online course option was, we want to create that. Of course, that involves lots of different approvals, paperwork for NHD as to create one ourselves. But we saw, Smart About Salt up in Canada, they already had, an online course option for some of their applicators up there. So talked to them and said, hey, you already have this worked out. Can we, mold it a little bit more to really fit our Green SnowPro standards so that our applicators can do this online as well.
And do you know the organization here in the States that domestically is dealing with salt issues? The counterpart of the one that's in Canada. You referenced that there's probably an organization here in the States. What would that be? Do you know?
I would say one that at least similar is SIMA, the Snow and Ice Management Association. And we partner with them actually for our annual SALT Symposium. So they also provide all different kinds of coursework and different certifications that, these companies can go, they can take, kind of put it on their resume of, hey, we took all these courses. They do a whole national symposium. I was fortunate enough to go to last year, which is a week-long, different talks going on. It's just different snow and ice management guys from all over, well, primarily northern states come together, talk about different issues going on, lots of questions, battling all these hurdles.
Thank you very much.
And Aubrey, I would just add one thing. With SIMA, we work closely with them to facilitate, host, plan the annual SALT Symposium in New Hampshire. But we're also starting conversations with them to have them provide like a professional revision and update to what's termed our best management practices guide. This was what was initially crafted when Green SnowPro was created. Like, we have to have a set of practices that we will educate Green SnowPro applicators around. That's the platform for what they have to follow in order to enjoy the limited liability protection. And it's that BMP manual that contains slides, training, fact sheets. It's a compendium that kind of coursework is based around. But it's a 2013 document, and it's old now, needs to be revised. And this is what crafty lawyers get their teeth into and try to pick apart. And this trial that Aubrey just mentioned lasted 5 days with a full jury, and an entire day was devoted to picking this manual apart to try to find weak spots that the opposing counsel there would hang their hat on and get a jury verdict in their favor, which didn't happen, but it was shaky. And we're going to work with SIMA to kind of update that, make it tight, work and have a working relationship with SIMA, our DES legal unit, and the New Hampshire Attorney General's office to make sure that that BMP manual that is providing that foundation for Green SnowPro is locked tight. And to be honest, back in 2011, 2012, we put that together pretty quickly because the legislation started moving fast. We're like, we work with New Hampshire DOT and UNH, and we said, this is it. This is the governing guidance document. But that was before we had the limited liability legislation through. So we kind of did it backwards. So we always feel like we're kind of on tenuous ground with that manual, as Aubrey knows, and it just needs to be tightened up. So we're looking to SIMA to give us their national perspective and have a current set of BMP guidance materials that we can then have adopted for the program and updated very, very soon.
So I'm going to end the recording now. We don't have to stop. I'm not sure. Let's figure out how to end. Here it is.